Hours before my wife slipped into a coma, she grabbed my wrist with a strength I did not know she still had. Her fingers dug into my skin. "Promise me," she whispered, "put everything in Serena's name." I leaned closer because I thought I had heard her wrong. "Our house?" She nodded once. "The cabin?" Another tiny nod. "Our savings?" Her eyes filled with tears. "Everything." I stared at her, waiting for the explanation, the punchline, anything that would make the sentence feel like the woman I had known for 43 years. Instead, she whispered something that made even less sense. "Don't tell them why." At the time, I blamed the medication. A month later, I realized my wife had been protecting me from something I never saw coming. My name is Nathaniel Grant. I am 67 years old, retired, and until last spring, I thought I understood my family. I was wrong. Lillian and I had been married for 43 years. We met in 1982 while I was wiring a new grocery store on the north side of Indianapolis. She was opening a small pharmacy next door. I kept inventing reasons to walk over during lunch and buy things I did not need. Toothpaste, bandages, a bottle of aspirin that lasted me 3 years. One afternoon, she finally laughed and said, "Either you are the clumsiest electrician in Indiana, or you are trying to ask me out." I married her 9 months later. Looking back, we did not have some dramatic love story. We built a life the slow way. Mortgage payments, school fundraisers, replacing roofs, fixing water heaters, taking one modest vacation every summer. The kind of marriage that becomes so woven into ordinary life, you stop noticing how much the other person carries until they are suddenly gone. For the last 15 years, we lived in Carmel, Indiana. Every morning started the same way. Coffee at 6. The local newspaper spread across the kitchen table. Lillian always did the crossword before I was allowed to touch it. She claimed I cheated because I spent decades reading wiring diagrams. "I don't cheat," I would tell her. "You absolutely cheat." Then she would slide the paper across the table with a smile. It became our little ritual. I honestly thought we would keep doing it until we were 90. Life does not ask what you have planned. One Tuesday afternoon in April, Lillian collapsed while watering flowers beside our front porch. The ambulance arrived in less than 10 minutes. Those sirens still echo in my head. At IU Health Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis, everything happened too fast. Doctors, scans, forms, words I never wanted to hear. Brain hemorrhage, emergency surgery, critical condition. Someone handed me coffee. I do not remember drinking it. I only remember staring at the paper cup until it went cold. Serena arrived before I even called her. She had always had that instinct. Our adopted daughter lived 20 minutes away in Fishers with her husband, Andre. By the time I looked up from the waiting room chair, she had already spoken to the nurses, brought me a clean shirt from home, and somehow convinced me to eat half a turkey sandwich. "Dad," she said quietly. I looked at her. "You haven't taken your blood pressure medicine?" I blinked. She was right. I had forgotten. She reached into her purse. "I picked up a refill on my way here." I looked at the orange prescription bottle. "I didn't even call the pharmacy." "You didn't have to." That was Serena. She noticed the things nobody else did. She never made a show of helping. She simply helped. The surgery lasted nearly 6 hours. The neurosurgeon finally walked into the waiting room with tired eyes. "We were able to stop the bleeding," he said. "The next 48 hours are critical." Those words became our whole world. Serena slept in a waiting room chair. She brought me coffee every morning. She reminded me to stretch my legs. She argued with one nurse until they found me a warmer blanket because she had noticed I was shivering. Malcolm and Denise did not arrive until the following afternoon. Malcolm hugged me hard. "I'm so sorry, Dad." Denise cried into my shoulder. For a moment, I felt ashamed that I had wondered why they had not come sooner. Grief affects people differently, I reminded myself. Malcolm brought flowers. Denise brought muffins from a bakery Lillian loved. Everything seemed normal. Then tiny moments started bothering me. Not enough to accuse anyone, just enough to make me uncomfortable. While Lillian was being wheeled for another CT scan, Denise gently slipped Lillian's diamond tennis bracelet off her wrist. Seeing me watch, she smiled. "I'll keep this safe. Hospitals lose things." That sounded reasonable. So why did it leave a knot in my stomach? Later that evening, Malcolm sat beside me. He lowered his voice. Have you talked with Mom's financial advisor yet? I frowned. No. You probably should. Why? He shrugged. Just so everything is organized. I remember thinking it was an odd conversation to have while Lillian was still fighting for her life, but I told myself he was trying to be responsible. People say strange things when they are scared. 2 days later, something changed. Lillian opened her eyes only for a few minutes. The nurse called me in immediately. She looked exhausted, pale, weak, but completely aware. She glanced toward the doorway. Everyone out! Serena quietly squeezed my shoulder before leaving with Malcolm and Denise. When the door closed, Lillian looked straight at me. Her hand searched for mine. I held it carefully. She whispered, Listen, don't interrupt. I nodded. Everything to Serena. I thought I had not heard correctly. What? Our house? Lillian. The cabin. You need to rest. Savings. I shook my head. No. She squeezed my hand harder than I thought possible. Promise. What about Malcolm and Denise? Tears rolled down her face. Don't tell them. This doesn't make sense. I know. Then explain. I can't. I searched her eyes. She was not confused. She was not hallucinating. She looked exactly like the woman I had lived beside for 43 years. Calm, certain. She whispered one final sentence. If you love me, trust me one last time. Then she closed her eyes. The attorney she had worked with for years already had documents waiting. Apparently, Lillian had prepared them months earlier. I kept expecting someone to tell me there had been a mistake. No one did. The physician confirmed she was alert, oriented, and legally competent. With trembling hands, Lillian signed every final document. Less than 4 hours later, she slipped into a coma. I walked back into the waiting room, feeling like I had stepped into someone else's life. Malcolm stood as soon as he saw me. He placed a hand on my shoulder. His voice sounded gentle, almost caring. By the way, Dad, I looked at him. Where are Mom's property files now? The question caught me off guard. He asked it so casually that, for a second, I wondered if grief had made me unfair. Maybe he was only trying to help. Maybe I was exhausted enough to hear suspicion where there was none. I forced a tired smile. I'm not worrying about paperwork right now. He nodded. Of course. Neither am I. Then he glanced toward the ICU doors. I just don't want strangers getting involved. At the time, I let it go. Looking back, that was the first conversation I wish I had replayed more carefully. Lillian never woke up again. 26 days later, with Serena holding one hand and me holding the other, the heart monitor finally went silent. I always imagined losing someone happened in one devastating moment. It does not. The moment comes, then it keeps happening. The drive home, opening the front door. Seeing her gardening gloves hanging by the garage, walking past the coffee mug she always used. Every ordinary thing suddenly feels impossible. The funeral was held on a cloudy Saturday morning at our church in Carmel. Lillian would have liked it. No unnecessary fuss. Fresh white lilies, her favorite hymns, friends from church, neighbors we had known for decades, former co-workers from the pharmacy. Even a few of my old electrician buddies came wearing jackets they probably had not touched in years. Malcolm greeted people at the entrance. Denise stood beside him, thanking everyone for coming. Serena stayed close to me without hovering. Every few minutes, she quietly asked, Do you need water? Are you okay to stand a little longer? She never treated me like I was fragile. She simply paid attention. Malcolm gave a beautiful eulogy. Honestly, it was so heartfelt that it made me question every uneasy feeling I had carried from the hospital. He talked about Lillian teaching him to ride a bicycle, about Christmas mornings, about homemade chicken soup whenever he was sick. More than once, his voice cracked. Several people around me wiped tears. One woman leaned over afterward and whispered, You raised wonderful children. I almost corrected her. Then I realized she was not entirely wrong. I had helped raise Malcolm and Denise after marrying Lillian. I was never their father by blood, but I coached Little League, paid college tuition, helped Malcolm buy his first used truck, and covered Denise's rent one winter when she lost her job. I loved them the only way I knew how. Standing beside Lillian's casket, I found myself thinking maybe grief had made me suspicious for no reason. Maybe we would all find our way through this together. For about 2 days, that was exactly what I believed. The first crack was small. On Monday afternoon, Denise stopped by the house carrying takeout from our favorite Italian restaurant. She hugged me. "I figured you shouldn't be cooking." That was thoughtful. We ate quietly at the kitchen table. Halfway through dinner, she looked toward the back window. "You know," I looked up, "the lake cabin probably has a lot of value now." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I'm just saying the market is good. I haven't thought about selling." She shrugged. "No rush." Then she smiled and changed the subject. It was subtle enough that I wondered if I had imagined it. The next morning, Malcolm came over. He brought coffee. We sat on the porch where Lillian and I had spent countless mornings together. He stared out at the quiet street. "You holding up?" "I'm trying." He nodded sympathetically. Then he sighed. "Dad, can I bring something up?" "Sure. I've been thinking." Whenever someone starts a sentence that way after a funeral, you are about to hear something you will not enjoy. "You've got a lot on your shoulders now," he said. "I suppose." "Taxes," I nodded. "I'm insurance." Another nod. "Investments." He leaned forward. "I'd be happy to help manage everything." I laughed softly. "I appreciate it." "I'm serious." "I know. You shouldn't have to deal with all that at your age." Something about those last 3 words stayed with me. At your age. Not because they were cruel, because they sounded rehearsed. I smiled anyway. "I've managed our finances for 40 years. "I know." He paused. "I'm just saying things change." After he left, I sat on the porch for nearly an hour, not because of the conversation, because for the first time in decades, there was no one sitting in the chair beside me. Grief has strange habits. Every evening around 6, I automatically reached for 2 dinner plates. Every evening. Every time I stopped halfway to the table and put one plate back. It became the loneliest routine of my life. One Thursday, Serena let herself in using the spare key. She found me staring into the refrigerator. "You forget why you came in here?" she asked with a small smile. I laughed. "Maybe. You've been standing here 3 minutes." "I have?" She walked over and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "I made chicken noodle soup. I'm not hungry." "I know." She opened containers anyway. While we ate, she noticed my pill organizer sitting untouched beside the coffee maker. "You missed yesterday." I looked down. So I had. Without saying another word, she filled a glass of water and slid it toward me. She never scolded me. That somehow made it harder not to listen. Over the next week, I started hearing little conversations I was not meant to hear. Not dramatic ones. Just enough to make me uneasy. One afternoon, Malcolm was standing outside talking on his phone. The kitchen window happened to be open. I was not eavesdropping. I was watering Lillian's tomato plants because I could not bear to let them die too. His voice drifted across the yard. "He'll come around." A pause. "No, not yet." Another pause. "We just need him to admit Mom wasn't thinking clearly." I froze. The hose slipped from my hand. Water splashed across my shoes. Malcolm turned and saw me through the window. For one terrifying second, our eyes met. He smiled, waved, and continued walking toward his truck. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe they were talking about medical decisions. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe became my constant companion. Later that evening, Serena came by again. She noticed I had barely touched dinner. "You've been crying." "I'll be all right." She sat across from me. "Dad." "What?" "If this inheritance is causing all this?" She hesitated. "I'll sign whatever papers they want." I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I don't want you fighting your family because of me." "Serena." "I mean it." She looked genuinely uncomfortable. "I never wanted any of this." "Do you know what's in your name now?" She shook her head. "Not really." "You've never asked." "I don't care." "You should." "No." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'd rather have dinner with you every Thursday than own 10 houses. Something inside me cracked. Not because of the money, because I believed her. The following Monday, the mail carrier rang the bell instead of leaving the envelope in the mailbox. Certified delivery. I signed. The return address belonged to Lillian's longtime estate attorney in downtown Indianapolis. Inside was a single letter. No explanation, no legal jargon. Just one short paragraph. At the bottom, one sentence had been underlined in blue ink. Lillian instructed us to wait exactly 30 days after her passing before showing you the truth. Please come alone except for Serena. Everything will finally make sense. I read it 3 times. Then I looked across the kitchen at Lillian's empty chair. For the first time since she died, I felt something other than grief. I felt fear. I barely slept the night before the meeting. Not because I was afraid of lawyers. I was afraid of answers. For 30 days, I replayed Lillian's final words in my head. Everything to Serena. Don't tell them why. I kept wondering if I had misunderstood. Maybe she had been trying to protect Serena from taxes. Maybe she wanted to avoid arguments. Every explanation I came up with sounded more reasonable than the last. Every one of them turned out to be wrong. The attorney's office sat on the 12th floor of a downtown Indianapolis building overlooking Monument Circle. Lillian had worked with the same estate attorney for nearly 20 years. His name was Howard Pierce. Gray hair, perfect posture, the kind of man who never seemed rushed. When Serena and I walked in, he stood immediately. I'm very sorry for your loss, Nathaniel. Thank you. He shook Serena's hand. Then another woman introduced herself as Lillian's CPA. A third person, a physician named Dr. Camille Brooks, quietly nodded from across the conference table. That surprised me. I looked at Howard. I thought this was about the estate. It is. Why is there a doctor here? You'll understand shortly. I did not like that answer. Howard placed 6 sealed envelopes on the conference table. Each one had Lillian's handwriting. One read Nathaniel. Another read, if Malcolm challenges the estate. Another read, if Denise asks about the trust. Serena stared at them. I've never seen these before. Howard nodded. That was intentional. Then he picked up a remote. We are going to begin with something Lillian specifically instructed us to show only after 30 days. The lights dimmed. A television mounted on the wall flickered on. For one impossible second, there she was, healthy, smiling, wearing the blue cardigan she always wore on cool spring mornings. I forgot to breathe. Hi, sweetheart. She was not talking to the camera. She was talking to me. If you're watching this, she said, smiling softly, I'm probably gone. Serena quietly reached over and held my arm. Lillian continued. I know you're confused. You've spent 30 days wondering why I asked you to trust me. I owe you an explanation. She looked down for a moment. When she looked back up, her smile had disappeared. I've been keeping something from you. She told us everything, not all at once, slowly, patiently, like she had rehearsed it 100 times. It did not happen overnight. It happened one conversation at a time, one request at a time, one excuse at a time. About 3 years earlier, Malcolm had started asking for money more often. At first it sounded reasonable. A slow season at work, unexpected medical bills, home repairs. Lillian helped. Then came Denise. Credit card debt, car trouble, a business investment that could not wait. Again, Lillian helped. None of that bothered her at first. Parents help their children. That is what they do. What bothered her was that neither one ever asked how she was doing before asking for money. The room felt painfully quiet. Lillian continued. I started keeping notes. Howard opened the first envelope. Inside was one of Lillian's journals. Not dramatic diary entries. Simple dates, short observations. March 12th. Malcolm asked for $8,000. Didn't ask about my MRI results. June 4th. Denise called. Needed money. Conversation lasted 4 minutes. Never asked how I was feeling. I looked away as my stomach tightened. The video continued. Nathaniel, I didn't tell you because I know you. You always believe people deserve one more chance. She laughed softly. It is one of the reasons I fell in love with you. Serena wiped tears from her face. Lillian kept speaking. I was afraid your kindness would become the thing they used against you. Those words landed harder than anything else she had said, because they were true. If Malcolm had apologized, I probably would have forgiven him. If Denise had cried, I would have written another check. Lillian knew that better than anyone. Howard slid another folder toward me. Inside were copies of bank statements, highlighted withdrawals, transfers, and loan repayments that had quietly become gifts. "I don't understand," I said. "You'll notice a pattern," Howard replied. I studied the dates. Nearly every large transfer happened after one of Malcolm's emotional phone calls or Denise's emergencies. I rubbed my forehead. "I approve these." "You did," Howard said gently. But Lillian began questioning whether the request would ever stop. Serena sat silently. She had not looked at a single financial page. She was watching me instead. The physician finally spoke. "Mr. Grant." I looked up. "Lillian asked me to evaluate her mental capacity 7 months before her stroke." I frowned. "Why?" "She told me she feared someone might someday claim she was not competent." The room went completely still. Dr. Brooks slid a signed report across the table. Lillian had passed every cognitive assessment perfectly. Months before she became ill, she had planned for someone to question her judgment. My heart started pounding. "She actually said that?" Howard answered quietly. "Yes." The next video segment began. Lillian looked tired this time. The recording had obviously been made later. "I need to tell you about the afternoon everything changed." She took a deep breath. "I came home early from physical therapy. No one knew. I heard Malcolm talking on the back patio." She paused. "I wasn't supposed to hear him." According to Lillian, Malcolm had been speaking with someone on his phone. She never identified who, but one sentence never left her. "Once Mom starts forgetting things, getting control will be much easier." I felt sick. Serena lowered her eyes. Lillian continued. "I didn't confront him. I went inside. I cried. Then I called Howard." The attorney quietly folded his hands. That was the day she decided to redesign her entire estate plan. More documents appeared, emails, meeting notes, trust paperwork, everything dated, everything organized. Lillian had not rushed into anything. She had spent nearly 2 years preparing, changing beneficiaries where appropriate, creating a trust for Serena, updating powers of attorney, meeting with financial advisors, leaving written explanations. Nothing hidden, nothing illegal. Just careful. Very careful. Then came the biggest surprise of the day. Howard looked toward Serena. "I need you to hear this." Serena nodded nervously. Howard opened another envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Lillian's voice returned through the speakers. "Serena, if you're sitting beside your father right now, you still don't know, do you?" Serena looked confused. Lillian smiled. "I know you. You've never cared about our money. You probably think you're only helping your dad." Serena whispered, "I did." Lillian nodded through the screen. "I also know that after hearing all this, you will probably offer to give everything back." Serena began crying openly. Lillian smiled through tears of her own. "That is exactly why I chose you." For several seconds, nobody in the room spoke. Not one person. I finally turned toward Howard. "So," I swallowed hard, "what happens now?" Before he could answer, his assistant knocked gently on the conference room door. She stepped inside carrying a file. Her expression had changed. "Mr. Pierce," she said, uncomfortable, "we've just been served." Howard opened the envelope. He sighed, then looked directly at me. "Malcolm has filed suit. He is contesting every transfer your wife made." I stared at the legal papers. 30 days earlier, I had buried my wife. Now I was about to fight for the last promise I ever made to her. The lawsuit arrived less than 2 hours after I learned why Lillian had changed everything. I wish I could tell you I stood up, squared my shoulders, and decided to fight. I did not. I drove home in complete silence. Serena offered to follow me in her car. I told her I wanted to be alone. That turned out to be a mistake. The house felt different that evening. Not emptier, heavier. I walked into the kitchen and automatically looked toward the chair where Lillian always sat. Then I remembered again. I made a sandwich, took one bite, and threw the rest away. Around 9, my phone rang. Malcolm. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, Denise called, then Malcolm again. Finally, a text appeared. "Dad, we don't want this getting ugly. Call us before the lawyers make things worse." I stared at the screen. They were the ones who had hired lawyers. Yet somehow I already felt like I was the problem. The following morning, Howard called. I assume you've heard from Malcolm. I have. Whatever happens, do not discuss the lawsuit directly with him. I don't want a lawsuit at all. I know. His voice softened. But wanting peace and giving away your rights are not always the same thing. That sentence stayed with me because I had spent most of my life keeping the peace. At work, at church, at family dinners. If someone wanted the last piece of pie, I let them have it. If someone cut in front of me at the grocery store, I shrugged it off. It worked for 40 years, until it did not. Within a week, it felt like everyone in Carmel knew something was happening. Small towns do not need newspapers. They have coffee shops. One Thursday morning, I stopped at the same diner Lillian and I had visited almost every Friday for 15 years. The waitress Carmen poured my coffee before I sat down. You doing okay, Mr. Grant? I'm getting there. She hesitated. I heard. I smiled politely. You heard what? She looked embarrassed. People are saying your adopted daughter convinced you to cut out the other kids. I set my coffee cup down. Not hard, just slowly. So that's the story now. I didn't believe it. I know, but somebody did. She reached across the counter and gently squeezed my hand. People always talk. I suppose. Driving home, I realized something painful. Rumors do not have to be true to make you feel alone. Serena was having an even harder time. One afternoon, she came over carrying groceries. Normally, she smiled the moment she walked through the door. Not that day. She quietly unpacked the bags without saying much. Finally, I asked, "What's wrong?" She shrugged. "Nothing." "Serena," she sighed. "A woman at church asked if I felt guilty." "Guilty for what?" "For taking advantage of an old man." I felt my face grow warm. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you taught me how to ride a bike." She smiled weakly. "And that you still beat me at checkers." I laughed despite myself. Then her smile disappeared. "I'm sorry you're going through this because of me." "This isn't because of you. It feels like it." She sat across from me. "Dad." I looked at her. "If you want me to sign everything back over." "No. I mean it." "So do I." She lowered her eyes. "I don't want people hating you." I reached across the table. "They're not hating me. They're judging you. There is a difference." She shook her head. "Does it feel different?" I did not have an answer. Discovery began a month later. Before this happened, I thought lawsuits were mostly dramatic courtroom speeches. Real life is not like television. Most of it happens around conference tables, boxes of documents, bank statements, emails, questions, lots of questions. Howard prepared me carefully. "The facts matter." "I know. Not your anger." "I know. Not Malcolm's temper." "I know." He smiled. "Good." Over several meetings, a timeline slowly emerged. Lillian had not made one emotional decision. She had made dozens of careful ones over nearly 2 years. Every meeting with Howard was documented. Every estate change had witnesses. Every signature matched. Every financial decision followed professional advice. Nothing had been rushed. Nothing looked suspicious. It looked exactly like what it was. A woman making legal decisions while she still could. Then Howard showed me something I had not expected. A short video. Black and white. No sound. The front porch of our lake cabin recorded by the doorbell camera. I had forgotten we installed it after a package theft 2 summers earlier. The date appeared in the corner. 3 days after Lillian's funeral. Malcolm walked up the steps. He unlocked the front door with a key. He stayed inside almost 40 minutes. Then he left carrying a cardboard box. I stared at the screen. I never gave him permission. "You didn't have to." "What does that mean?" Howard folded his hands. "We checked." The box contained old family photo albums and financial folders. He returned them later after learning the property had already transferred into Serena's trust. I felt physically sick. So he wasn't stealing. "We cannot prove intent," Howard said, "but he certainly was not there to remember his mother." A week later, I visited Lillian's grave alone for the first time. It was early, barely after sunrise. The cemetery was quiet except for birds somewhere in the maple trees. I brought fresh daisies, her favorite. I sat on a small folding chair I had brought from home. For a long time, I said nothing. Finally, I spoke. I don't know how to do this. The word surprised even me. I fixed electrical problems for 40 years. I could diagnose almost anything, but I don't know how to fix this. A breeze moved through the trees. I looked at her headstone. I keep wishing you'd tell me what to do. Of course, she did not answer. But I remembered something she once told me after I nearly quit my business during the recession. The right decision usually feels harder at first. I smiled. She had been right then. Maybe she still was. Serena picked me up later that afternoon for a doctor's appointment. She insisted, no arguments. The doctor said you shouldn't drive after those blood pressure readings. She was right again. On the drive home, she stopped at a little ice cream shop we had visited years earlier. I thought we deserved a break. I ordered butter pecan, Lillian's favorite. Serena smiled. I knew you would. For the first time in months, we talked about something besides hospitals, lawyers, or court dates. We talked about fishing at the lake, about Andre accidentally burning hamburgers every 4th of July, about Lillian cheating at card games whenever she thought nobody noticed. We laughed, real laughter. It felt strange and necessary. The following Friday, Howard called. His voice sounded different this time, more confident. The judge denied Malcolm's emergency motion. What does that mean? He wanted the court to freeze Serena's trust immediately, and the judge refused. I closed my eyes. So we're okay. We're moving forward toward trial. I looked out the kitchen window toward the porch where Lillian used to drink morning coffee. The fight was not over, not even close. But for the first time since she died, I believed I was not fighting it alone. The morning of the hearing, I woke up at 4:37, not because of an alarm, because that was the time Lillian used to get up whenever she could not sleep. For a few seconds, lying there in the dark, I reached across the bed. My hand found nothing but a cold sheet. I stayed there another minute. Then I got up. The courthouse in Noblesville, where the Hamilton County Superior Court sits, was less than 30 minutes from my house. But I left early anyway. Old habit. My father used to say if you're on time, you're late. Lillian always rolled her eyes when I repeated it. You and your father, she would laugh. Two men who could arrive early to Christmas. That memory stayed with me all the way to the courthouse. The hallway outside the courtroom was already crowded. Malcolm stood with his attorney. Denise sat quietly beside him. Neither looked at me. Serena did. She walked over. You okay? I think so. She studied my face. You didn't sleep. I slept enough, she smiled. You sound exactly like Mom. That caught me off guard for a second. I almost laughed. Howard approached carrying 2 large binders. Ready? No. Good. I frowned. Good? People who think these days are easy usually make mistakes. The hearing was not loud or dramatic the way television makes courtrooms look. Most of it was calm, professional, methodical. The judge listened more than he spoke. Witnesses answered questions. Documents were admitted. Timelines were reviewed. Everything moved one careful step at a time. Malcolm's attorney argued first. His central claim was simple. Lillian had been under enormous stress. She had suffered health problems. According to him, she made irrational decisions that unfairly disinherited her biological children. Then he looked toward me. Mr. Grant loved his wife deeply. I have no doubt about that. But grief can cloud memory. I wanted to interrupt. Howard lightly touched my sleeve. Not yet. The first witness was Dr. Camille Brooks. She explained every cognitive evaluation she had performed months before Lillian's stroke. She described memory tests, reasoning exercises, and decision-making assessments. Then Malcolm's attorney asked, Doctor, is it possible Mrs. Grant later became confused? Certainly. Could that confusion have affected her decisions? Dr. Brooks remained perfectly calm. The estate documents in question were signed before any evidence of cognitive impairment. So your opinion is? My opinion is that Mrs. Grant clearly understood exactly what she was doing. The courtroom became very quiet. Next came Howard. He walked everyone through the timeline, meeting after meeting, revision after revision. Nothing rushed, nothing hidden. Lillian had not rewritten everything in a single afternoon. She had carefully updated her plans over nearly 2 years. Every major decision had witnesses. Every signature was notarized. Every legal requirement had been followed. Malcolm shifted in his chair. For the first time all morning, I noticed him looking nervous. Then came the moment I was not prepared for. Howard looked at the judge. "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to play a recorded statement Mrs. Grant instructed us to preserve as part of her estate planning." Permission was granted. The lights dimmed. Lillian appeared on the courtroom screen. The room became completely still. She was not speaking to strangers. She was speaking to us, her family. "If you're seeing this," she said gently, "it means I can't explain these decisions myself." She took a slow breath. "I love all three of my children." Malcolm looked up immediately. "So please understand, this is not about loving one child more. It is about trusting one child differently." No one moved. Lillian continued. "Serena never asked me for money. She asked whether I had taken my medication. She never asked about the cabin. She asked whether Nathaniel's back still hurt after working outside." She smiled sadly. "The difference matters." I looked down. My eyes had filled before I realized it. Then Lillian said something I had never heard before. "Nathaniel, if you're in that courtroom, please don't waste your heart trying to make everyone understand. Some people only understand what they lose." I closed my eyes. She knew me. Even then, she knew exactly what I would have been trying to do. Fix everything. Keep everyone together. She had spent 43 years watching me carry problems that did not belong to me. Even from beyond her life, she was trying to stop me from carrying one more. Cross-examination began. Malcolm's attorney did everything he could to minimize the recording. It was emotional. It reflected fear. It was not evidence of financial abuse. Then Howard quietly introduced the journals, the bank statements, and the estate planning timeline. Nothing sensational, just consistent. Page after page, year after year, each document supported the next. There was not one dramatic piece of evidence. There were hundreds of ordinary ones. Together, they painted the same picture. Finally, Malcolm was called to testify. At first, he remained composed. He explained that he only wanted fairness, that he was worried about his mother's health, that Serena had somehow influenced everyone. Howard asked simple questions. "When was the last time you visited your mother before her stroke?" Malcolm hesitated. "I don't remember." Howard handed him phone records. "Would reviewing these help?" Malcolm swallowed. "Maybe." The records showed almost 3 months without a visit. Howard nodded. No further questions on that point. Then he asked another. "Mr. Grant, why did you enter the lake cabin 3 days after your mother's funeral?" "I wanted family photographs. Without asking permission. I had a key." "That wasn't my question." Malcolm shifted again. "I didn't think I needed permission." Howard paused. "Because you believed it already belonged to you." Malcolm did not answer immediately. That silence spoke louder than anything else. Then came the moment none of us expected. Howard asked one final question. "Do you believe Serena deserved any part of Lillian Grant's estate?" Malcolm looked toward Serena, then toward me. His face turned red. He slammed a hand against the witness stand. "She's not even real family." The words echoed across the courtroom. Nobody spoke. Not the judge, not the attorneys, not the spectators. Serena lowered her head. I wanted to stand up. Instead, I remained exactly where I was because Lillian had been right. Malcolm had answered every important question himself. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Grant," he said calmly, "let me make something very clear. Adoption creates legal family, and respect creates lasting family. Answer only the questions asked." Malcolm never recovered. By late afternoon, the judge delivered his ruling. He found no evidence that Lillian lacked capacity, no evidence of fraud, no evidence of undue influence. Instead, he noted the overwhelming documentation showing thoughtful estate planning and expressed concern over the pressure placed on an elderly couple regarding financial matters. The trust remained intact. The property transfer stood. The case was over. Outside the courthouse, a few local reporters waited. Apparently, inheritance disputes involving longtime Carmel families sometimes attract attention. One reporter asked, "Mr. Grant, after everything that happened, what would you want other families to learn?" I thought about Lillian, our kitchen table, 43 ordinary years. Then I answered, Don't spend your whole life building an inheritance. I smiled faintly. Spend it building the kind of family that doesn't fight over one. No one asked another question. As Serena and I walked toward the parking lot, she slipped her arm through mine. Neither of us spoke. For once, we did not need to. The first Saturday after the trial, I drove to the lake cabin before sunrise. Not because I had work to do, because I needed to hear something besides lawyers. The gravel road looked exactly the way it always had. The old wooden porch still leaned just a little to the left. The wind moved gently through the maple trees. When I unlocked the front door, the cabin smelled like cedar, coffee, and memories. Lillian always said every house had its own voice. "This place whispers," she would tell me. Standing there alone, I finally understood what she meant. I spent the morning cleaning, not because the cabin was dirty, because grief likes to keep your hands busy. I folded blankets, organized fishing gear, wiped dust off picture frames. Around noon, I found one of Lillian's old flannel shirts hanging behind the bedroom door. I picked it up without thinking. For just a second, it still smelled like her lavender detergent. I sat on the edge of the bed, held the shirt in both hands, and cried harder than I had in months. Not because I was angry anymore, because I finally had room to miss her. Serena arrived that afternoon with Andre and their two children. 7-year-old Isaiah burst through the front door carrying a tackle box almost bigger than he was. "Grandpa!" He threw his arms around my waist. "I caught a bluegill last week." "You did?" "It was this big." He stretched both arms as far apart as he could. Andre laughed. "It was about 6 inches." Isaiah frowned dramatically. It looked bigger. For the first time in what felt like forever, the cabin sounded alive again. Serena carried in homemade potato salad. Andre unloaded hamburgers. The kids ran toward the dock. I stood on the porch watching all of them. Lillian would have loved that day. After dinner, Serena found me sitting alone near the water. She carried 2 mugs of coffee, one for me and one for herself, just like Lillian used to do. She sat quietly beside me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she reached into her bag. "Dad." She placed a thick envelope on the picnic table. "What's this?" She pushed it toward me. "I think you already know." Inside were property deeds, trust documents, account paperwork. Everything. Every asset Lillian had transferred. I looked up. "What are you doing?" Serena shrugged. "It was never mine." "It is." She shook her head. "It never felt like mine." "Your mother wanted—" "Our mother," she corrected gently. Then she smiled through damp eyes. "Our mother wanted you protected. I don't need any of this." I looked at the papers, then back at her. "You really mean that?" "I do." I laughed softly. "Lillian predicted this." Serena frowned. "What?" "There was a letter." "What letter?" I stood. "Come inside." I opened the small fireproof safe in the bedroom closet. At the very back sat one final envelope. Howard had given it to me after the trial. He told me to open it only when I was ready. I had not been until then. Across the front, in Lillian's handwriting, were 4 words. "For Nathaniel, only Nathaniel." I carefully unfolded the pages. The paper shook slightly in my hands. "My love, if you're reading this, then I hope the hardest part is behind you." I stopped for a second. Even on paper, I could hear her voice. "I know, Serena." The moment she realizes everything belongs to her, she'll try to give it back. Serena covered her mouth. Lillian continued, "Please don't let her, because if she offers everything without being asked, you'll know I made the right choice." Tears rolled down Serena's cheeks. "Mine too." The letter went on. "I never chose Serena because she was adopted. I chose her because she never kept score. She loved us when we had money. She would have loved us if we had nothing. That kind of love deserves trust." Nobody spoke for a long time. The only sound was water touching the dock. A few weeks later, Howard helped me make one final change. I did not transfer everything back to myself. That would have ignored Lillian's wishes. Instead, we created a carefully structured family trust. During my lifetime, I would have full financial security, complete control over my daily expenses, healthcare decisions, and the cabin I loved. After I was gone, the remaining assets would pass to Serena and eventually to her children. The trust also included clear safeguards so no one could pressure or manipulate an older family member the way Lillian had feared. When Howard finished explaining everything, he smiled. I think Mrs. Grant would approve. So do I. About 3 months later, another letter arrived. This one had Malcolm's return address. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. It was not long. Dad, I've started writing this letter 10 times. None of the first 9 sounded honest. I kept telling myself the lawsuit was about fairness. It wasn't. I was angry. I felt entitled. Somewhere along the way, I stopped acting like Mom's son and started acting like her future accountant. I actually laughed at that last sentence. Not because it was funny, because it was painfully accurate. The letter continued. I'm not asking for money. I know that ship has sailed. I'm asking whether someday you'll let me earn back a conversation. I folded the letter carefully. Serena found me holding it later that evening. You okay? I think so. You going to answer? I looked out toward the lake. Not today. You don't have to. I know, I smiled faintly. Maybe someday. Forgiveness is not a switch. It is more like rebuilding a bridge after a flood. You do not pretend the river never rose. You simply decide whether it is worth crossing again. People sometimes ask me what Lillian really left behind. They expect me to say the house, the investments, or the cabin. They are always surprised by my answer. She left me clarity. For most of my life, I believed loving someone meant saying yes, helping, sacrificing, keeping everyone happy. Lillian showed me something different. Real love also knows when to draw a line. Not out of anger, out of wisdom. These days, my mornings are different. I still wake up early. I still make coffee. Sometimes I even start the crossword before anyone can stop me. Lillian would probably accuse me of cheating. I would probably deny it. Some habits never leave us. Maybe that is a good thing, because every now and then, when Isaiah laughs from the dock or Serena reminds me to take my blood pressure medicine, I realize Lillian never really disappeared from this family. She simply left the rest of us a better way to love each other. Thank you for spending this time with me.